Is God all seeing?
Is God all seeing? Yes, God sees everything.
Is God all good?
Yes, God is all good.
That's my dilemma. Like, how can God be all seeing and be all good? Like, if he's all seeing, he's not all good. And if he's all good, he's definitely not all seeing. I mean, look around,
Okay, very good question, very hard question. Is it possible that an all-powerful God...
If I wrote down word for word what you said like a reporter,
yes,
and put it in a book,
right,
and it was 100% your word, would you say it's 100% your word?
Yes, if you were accurate, yes.
Now, what if it was 90% accurate, 80% accurate?
Yep.
When do you say, no, that's not what I said? Because every time it got passed down through another person, through another king, they added in more and more stuff for greed, kind of more and more, give me some of your money this month, or, you know, everybody act right, and this is going to happen, like,
good.
You know, where does that kind of go?
Very good. Okay, now, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written in the first century by the eyewitnesses and by those who knew the eyewitnesses. And there were a lot of eyewitnesses who were still alive, which means there were people around who could say, no, sorry, Jesus did not say that. That's false.
But like always in history, the winners always write, you know, they always write the books. So the Romans kind of put it in there.
Good point. All right, is that true that the winners always write the books?
Like the losers aren't around to tell their story because they're dead.
All right. What about the Jewish people who wrote about the Holocaust? Did the Jewish people win the Holocaust? Well, the Allies eventually won, but obviously the majority of Jews who got gassed, they didn't win nothing. So what's fascinating is to read about the first century Christians. Have you ever heard of the Roman Colosseum? Okay, what happened to Christians in the Roman Colosseum? Slaughtered, martyred. So when you study the first century, what you begin to realize is followers of Christ did not have power. They were being slaughtered. You ever hear of a guy named Emperor Nero of Rome? What did Nero do? Nero took Christians, put them on poles, put tar on them, and lit them to light his gardens. And then he played his harp while Rome burned. So this idea that Christians were in a position of power, and therefore the Gospels are corrupted because the powerful people got their way, it's not true to history. How did Peter die? Nailed to a wooden cross, upside down. How did Paul die, the Apostle Paul? Beheaded by the Romans. How did James, the brother of Christ, die? Thrown from the top of the temple, crushed as he hit the ground. You see, the guys who wrote the New Testament were not the winners. They were the losers. They all got martyred. And yet, even though they were martyred for their faith, they insisted, we saw Jesus, we heard him, we saw him risen from the dead, he is reliable.
I mean, I don't know, my only issue is that, like, if you're a king, you're not going to allow that to happen. If the only reason for them to want to do that is like a human truth, all humans need to be motivated. They need to be comforted. They need to have a reason, a purpose, guidance. So for, like, yeah, I would allow that book to get to my people if I was king or King James or any of them too. Like, so I see why I got passed. I'm just asking you, like, it doesn't make sense. It's too perfect.
Sir, the kings of that time were trying to squash Christianity. Now, in the 1600s, when King James hired Greek scholars and Hebrew scholars to translate the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament into English, yes, he was in a position of power. But we don't go back to the King James Version to find out about Jesus. We go back to the Greek New Testament, which was written in the first century, to find out about Jesus. And the Christian church did not get politically powerful until about 320s, when Constantine, the Roman emperor, embraced Christianity. But that was not till the early 300s. In the first, second, and third century, Christians were slaughtered for their faith in Christ.
So if all the important stuff happened when everybody was getting slaughtered and all that was happening, and then all everything we look to now for like data happened, whenever Christianity was coming up and getting all important and getting into government. I just don't see how you trust it. Okay, how about another one, the Holocaust?
Yeah.
Is God all-seeing?
Is God all-seeing? Yes, God sees everything.
Is God all good?
Yes, God is all good.
That's my dilemma. Like, how can God be all-seeing and be all good? Like, if he's all-seeing, he's not all good. And if he's all good, he's definitely not all-seeing. I mean, look around.
Okay, very good question. Very hard question. Is it possible that an all-powerful God chose to partially limit his power by giving you and me a free will? Is it possible for an all-powerful God to partially limit his power by giving you and me a free will?
Is his power absolute?
Yes.
Then yeah.
His power is absolute. But as God, he is more than capable of limiting his power by giving you and me a free will.
So did he give up some of his power to give us free will, or did he limit his power?
He limited his power. He didn't give it up. He's still all-powerful, and there will be a day of judgment when he holds us responsible for the wrong decisions we've made. But obviously he limited his power. It's real simple. Slap. Hey, Cliff, why did you slap your son Robert? Because God made me do it. That's a cop-out. God did not make me slap my son. God gave me a free will and a hand. I can love and respect my son, or I can hold back and slap him. And if I say to you, God made me slap my son, I'm a con artist, a charlatan, a liar, and a hypocrite. Does that make sense? You see, it's the whole issue of free will, sir. It's the whole issue of, are you a machine? Are you a computer? Or are you a human being with personhood, with a free will? And I would argue you're not a machine. I would argue you're a person with free will. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I fear the unknown. I've never died. I'm going to die one day. Am I scared of that? Yes, sir, I am. Do I believe there's life after death? Yes, I do now. Why? Is it simply because I'm scared to die that I believe there's life after death? That would be pretty weak intellectually.
That's pretty selfish.
Okay, good. So we'll take both of those. Weak intellectually and pretty selfish to believe there's life after death just because I'm scared to die. Okay. Now, when I'm confronted by the historical Jesus of Nazareth, I'm confronted by an historical person who said, believe in me and I will give you eternal life. So what? A lot of crazy people talk like that. But the difference with Jesus is he died, was buried, 3 days later, he rose from the dead, and over a period of 40 days, he appeared to over 500 people who saw him risen from the dead. They were willing to die, not for their belief. They were willing to die for what they claimed to have seen, the dead Christ risen from the dead. So there is historical evidence that there's life after death. It is the historical resurrection of Jesus Christ. Second issue that you raised is, yeah, but come on, Cliff, your desire to live life after death is just selfishness. Okay, you're right, it could just be selfishness. But wait a second, think. Why don't you go out and play in traffic on I-35? Is it just because you're selfish? No. I would argue you don't go out and play in traffic on I-35 because you affirm the value of your life. And that is good. If you go out and play in traffic on I-35, you are not affirming the value of your life. You're saying, it's just cool to get smashed and run over by a car or a truck. So it's not just selfishness that motivates you to want to have life after death. It is an affirmation of the value of your life. And that is why a follower of Christ ultimately puts their faith in Christ, because Christ affirmed the value of life. Now, what is atheism? Atheism is a culture of death. Because atheism says there's no purpose to life ultimately, morality is relative, and when death occurs, It's the fertilizer pit. And that is why Albert Camus, the great French atheistic existentialist philosopher, wrote a book called The Stranger, L'étranger in French. And the first lines of the book are, a young teenage boy says, "Yesterday mother died. Or was it today? Who gives a rip when mom dies? Death simply ends the absurdity that birth began." See, that's a culture of death, and I respect Camus, because he's taking his atheism seriously. He's taking it to its logical conclusion. If there is no God, my birth is an accident, my death is an accident, there's no life after death, and guess what lies between those two accidents called my birth and my death? Another accident called my life. And that's why he says, yesterday mother died. Or was it today? Who gives a rip when mom died? Life is an accident, it's absurd, and death simply ends the absurdity that birth began. You see how logically consistent Camus is? That's why, if you think about it, atheism is a culture of death, if you think rationally. Jesus Christ contradicts that culture of death and says, no, God created you to live and to affirm the value of your life, and he offers you life after death, eternal life, when you put your faith in him. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. It just, humans are so good at doing these mental gymnastics. I mean, even in psychology, you can experience something. I mean, you can watch the same movie and then come out of it and see two totally different movies.
Yes.
And like culturally, that has a big effect on you too. Like, if you were somewhere else, you would have been raised growing up believing, oh, you go kill yourself for the cause and you get 21 virgins in heaven, and you think that's right, you know, and you go do it and, you know, praise Allah, blah blah, and you think it's all good like that. But over here, you from America? You born here?
Yep. New York City, the Big Apple.
Yeah, Christianity, the white man's religion, all that stuff.
Yep.
Absolutism is wrong, and everybody is experiencing a different version of reality, and we can't label things. I mean, we can label things as objectively like, okay, violence, bad. Sexism, probably bad. Like anything like that where people are being marginalized, probably bad. Okay, so there are a couple of basic things that's almost not worth mentioning, because everyone who is like at a level to be having discussion needs to sort of understand that, and they probably already do. So having understood that there is things that are like, okay, let's not do that because society can't function if people are going and doing things which are accepted as bad, then all of that aside, people's beliefs and stuff, whatever, shouldn't be, I don't know, they shouldn't be ranked. They
but just please be honest enough to acknowledge you are being exclusivistic, you are being imperialistic, you are being colonialistic, because you're saying the truth is that all cultures are relative. Nobody has the truth, and you're advocating that the way to world peace is for everybody to wake up, smell the coffee, and realize that their absolute claims are false, that it's all culturally relative. So just please acknowledge what you're doing. And let's not act like, oh no, it's only the Muslims and the Christians or the Hindus who are being absolutist. You're being absolutist by saying cultural relativism is true. And all these people who make these absolute claims, be they Muslim, Jew, Christian, are wrong.
Okay, the Nahuatl Aztecs and their multi-deity belief system, where Teotl, which is like the God element, I suppose, to put it in terms that relate back to Christianity, that flows through everything, are they wrong? Their thing is completely different from all of that. And they just go about and they did their own thing, and their civilization came and went and is alive in certain pockets, and those people have a right to just exist without other people thinking that like we're somehow better than them because there is a hierarchy and ranking.
So are you saying that the Aztecs have a right not to have you as a white American tell them that their cultural relativism is true and their beliefs are untrue?
Can we go down the road of cultural, or just absolutism in general, and talk about where do you get that from? Like, where you get your I would assume from the Bible, right?
No. First of all, I think rationally. I try to. I don't always succeed, but I think rationally.
Okay.
And so I understand that if you're a cultural relativist, you're making a truth claim. And that truth claim is, truth in any absolute sense does not exist, except my truth that everything's relative. So you see, cultural relativism is self-refuting.
I'm asking.
It's contradicting itself.
I'm asking you if your viewpoint comes from a point of like absolutism. Where do you get your absolutes from?
I'm saying everybody who makes a truth claim is making an absolute.
You're making a truth claim. He's making a truth claim.
That's right, and you're making a truth claim. That's correct. We all make truth claims. So let's not act like some of us are exclusivistic and imperialistic and colonialistic, and others of us are just open-minded. That's baloney. If you're a cultural relativist, you are contradicting the vast majority of humanity, who believe that there is one God, or many gods, or no God. And you're saying, guess what, bud? It doesn't matter. It's all relative. So that's quite a claim you're making.
But how is that refuting
Just
them?
realize you're making quite a claim.
Is it? Is it absolute? I mean, you're saying it's self-refuting in the sense that like you have to have some sort of like absolute foundation in order to believe in cultural relativism. Is what you're saying?
No, I'm not
right?
saying that. I'm simply saying if you're going to stand out here and maintain cultural relativism, you're making a truth claim.
Which is
you're saying the Muslims are not absolutely right, the Christians are not absolutely right, the Marxists are not absolutely right, the nihilists are not absolutely right. It's all relative, which means you all just create it in your head. That's what you're saying. Fine, I respect your right to say that, but intellectually, I argue you're a hypocrite if what you're going to insist is, but I'm not imperialistic, I'm not colonialistic. When I go to Aztecs or Muslims or Christians and tell them, you're wrong, cultural relativism is right.
But
now,
I'm
you can
not
do that.
telling anyone that they're wrong. I'm just saying, why can't they all exist in a non-ranked system? Why
A
can't they
cultural
all...
relativist is saying the absolutist, be they Muslim, Jew, Christian, is wrong. There's no absolute truth.
She's making a claim. She's making a claim of why they can't exist together. She's not making a claim of
why does it have to be a hierarchical?
Followers of
this
Christ,
belief is wrong.
when they follow Christ, have no option but to respect atheists, Muslims, Jews, cultural relativists. If I'm going to follow Jesus, I have no option but to respect cultural relativism.
I feel like you need to define your terms because you keep using that word.
Okay, what don't you understand?
cultural relativism.
The cultural relativism as you
all right, let me define
understand
it. Cultural relativism means your culture defines your reality a particular way, and you buy into it.
Like, I mean, I don't buy into this, and this is the culture that I'm surrounded by.
I want to play devil's advocate for just 1 second.
No. Let's not play devil's advocate. Let's be sincere. What do you believe?
No, I just want to say, if we go down if we go down like the logical chain of like, let's say we are cultural relativists,
yes.
or let's say like even more broadly that all beliefs are. It's different from person to person, so there's no like objective source of like belief. And I would assume you would say from that, it's like, well, that means that you can't tell somebody that they can't kill, or that means that they can't tell somebody to do horrible things, whatever. I would assume. I don't want to like straw man, but
tell me what you believe.
Well, I'm just asking if that's correct.
No, it's not correct. So just tell me what you believe, and I'll respond to what you believe.
I'm trying to go down like this logical progression.
What's the logical progression?
It was let's assume that more broadly, like getting out of like specifically like in culture. Let's just talk relativism just in general in terms of like morality. What is the problem if we? I would assume that the problem you have with relativism is if somebody says that everybody's beliefs, what they should ought not do, it's all just based on opinion. And I would assume your problem with that would be, well, then you can't tell somebody that murder is wrong or something like that. Is that correct?
Please don't assume anything. State your position, and I'm going to respond to you. But please state your position, and I'll respond. Go ahead.
He's asking you a question
I'm asking
you to give your
No. He's setting up a scenario and then asking me to jump in the scenario. And I'm asking you, make your statement.
I'm not trying to get you in a gotcha.
No, it's okay.
Because I use the term, I'm an elitist in my ideas, but I'm an egalitarian when it comes to the worth of each person.
Yeah.
Like, there's ideas out there that are really bad. In this country, we've realized that theocracies, they get a little messy after a while. So we have this idea of separation of church and state. We have the idea of free speech, that we want to protect that. We want to have these ideas. But I was arguing with this young lady that nihilism as an idea lived out is horrible. It's a bad idea when you take it to its logical conclusion.
Talking about nihilism?
Nihilism. Thank you, yeah.
I mean, I'm not a nihilist, but...
Right, good, thank you. I'm glad you're not.
So what do you believe, and why?
What do I believe in what context? Like terms of morality? In terms
What do you believe about Jesus Christ, and why do you believe that?
I don't believe that the Bible's true.
Okay, why?
because I think that there is demonstrable evidence and the fact that shows that it is not true.
Give me one piece of evidence that the Bible's not true.
No, I'm not. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that.
What do you mean you said you don't trust the Bible?
There's a difference.
And it's demonstrably false.
There's a difference between me making a claim, showing it's true, and you making a claim and not living up to your.
Well, what's the claim I've made with you?
That the Bible's true, right?
And when did I say that to you?
Because you're a Christian, right? So you believe
Well,
the Bible's
so
true.
what?
So can
Lots
you
of Christians believe lots of different things.
It's your evidence that you have to bring forward because you're saying, hey, X exists or X is true.
Well,
Show me.
ask me,
Show
Cliff,
me.
why do you think the Bible's reliable?
Why do you think the Bible's reliable?
Thank you for raising that excellent question. I am convinced that the New Testament is reliable.
Only the New Testament.
There's the New Testament.
Why? Why? Because if you negate
Why? Because I'm
the
out
rest
here
of
talking
it,
about Jesus Christ, and you read about Jesus in the New Testament. You don't read about him in the Old Testament.
Didn't he
So-
say that he didn't come to abolish the law but fulfill it?
Oh, very good. We'll get to that. But we first have to establish his credibility. And his credibility is put forth beautifully in the New Testament. So the question right now is, why would I trust the New Testament to give me accurate information about Jesus?
Yeah.
Because I have tests that I use on any document that claims to be historical. My tests are 4 in number. If you don't like my tests, no problem. I just want to hear your tests of how you decide whether a document's historically reliable or not. So my 4 tests are literary style, literary genre, archaeological evidence, manuscript evidence, and internal consistency. And when you take those 4 tests and apply them to the New Testament, they pass with flying colors. So I'm convinced you can get an accurate historical picture of Jesus by reading the New Testament. The archaeological evidence is the Pool of Bethesda, mentioned in John 5, has just recently been archaeologically found.
so we have one. Give me another
No,
one.
a Pool of Bethesda. We have Bethlehem.
because we found
We
that-
have
None of them
Nazareth.
exist. It is,
We
these
have
are
Rome.
geographical
I do wanna
places.
We have Julius Caesar, Tiberius Caesar.
We
have Pontius Pilate.
Okay, I wanna-
Archaeological digs have exposed that these people are not made up by the New Testament.
quick.
They're in the Roman record.
I have just something I wanted to say specifically about if the Bible says that a certain archaeological site exists and we find it 1,000 years from now, then we are to assume that all the miracles that Jesus did and all those things are true. So if 1,000 years from now,
No, sir.
no, hold on.
That is not my argument.
Hold on.
My argument is
on.
not that the miracles occurred. You got to be honest with me. My argument is the New Testament historically reliable?
But things are on a claim by claim basis, because here's the problem: if archaeologists like 10,000 years from now dig up New York City, does that mean that also Spider-Man existed?
No.
Well, they're gonna find
so
comic
if we
books
find
of
if we find a
Spider-Man?
pool, if we find this pool that's mentioned in the Bible, does that mean anything about Jesus is true, that he was born from
No,
Mary?
that is not my point.
That he was crucified. all
You're
those
attacking a straw man. You're doing a very good job. That was not my point. My point was not that because
straw man.
the Pool of Bethesda is there, that all that Jesus is said to have done in the New Testament is true. That's not my point.
You're saying that
my
because
point is
that-
because exactly
the pool
4
exists,
tests.
that the New
You take
Testament's
those 4
true.
tests together. The historical
because-
evidence is
so
the
because you
Gospels
find-
are reliable.
So because you find this pool or any other archaeological site that also exists in the Bible, means that we are assuming that all of the New Testament is reliable
No.
and true. That is.
I had 4 tests. I gave you 4 tests.
How long
Yeah.
ago
I said
was
you
it?
take those 4
what do
tests
these 4 tests
together.
determine? What do they determine?
The historical reliability of the
New
document, the New
right?
Testament.
Who made up these
exactly. That's
tests?
what I said. So no, hold on. So
Sorry.
no, it's okay. So if we are to assume, okay, so we find these archaeological sites, then that shows the historical accuracy of the entire New Testament, so we can assume the entire thing is true.
No, the Gospels. We're talking
Including
about the Gospels.
including the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, all the miracles he performed,
Yes,
et cetera, et cetera.
crucifixion.
So you're saying by finding all these archaeological sites, we can assume that Jesus was God
3
and
other
that he
tests.
did all these things.
No.
Literary-
Then the next step
literary
is
style is
the
kind
next
of-
step is you have to read the New Testament and ask yourself, does the historical evidence of the way he lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead point to his credibility, or does it not? That's what you have to do.
So you're saying that the archaeological evidence contributes to the Bible being reliable, and so if the Bible's reliable and you can use that, then you can use the Bible to say that Jesus is
Well,
a
then you have
person
to
that
read
did
the
things.
text and you have to ask yourself, does the text, which is
No,
historical in nature,
I asked a
point to the
particular
credibility of Christ, or does it not?
I asked a particular
I'm
question.
answering your particular question very clearly.
No, he's not.
Why, what did I miss? Tell me what I missed.
When I asked, you're using archaeological evidence to prove that the Bible is reliable.
No, it's
As
one of four
yes,
tests.
yes, one of four.
One of four tests
Okay.
that I use on any document.
Okay.
All right,
The
all right, all
Quran,
right. You're
the
good.
writings of Suetonius or
Okay.
Tacitus.
You got it.
Those
You
are the
got
four
it.
tests that I use.
All four things.
All right.
So you're saying that this one thing is one of the things that helps establish that the Bible is reliable, correct? Just yes or no?
No, the New Testament, guys.
New Testament. New Testament.
Some people had a problem with me talking
yeah.
about the New Testament.
Clarification
We're
is-
sticking with that. The New Testament.
New Testament.
So you're saying that that is what is being, so after you prove that the Bible is reliable, then you're using like, okay, look, the Bible's cool, it matches up, one of the things being archaeological evidence. And then you're saying now since all four meet up, we can go and we can look into the validity of Jesus performing miracles and stuff like that.
Okay, I was asked a question. Why do you trust the New Testament? My answer is, before I accept any document, be it the New
give it one of four
Testament,
tests.
be it the Quran or whatever,
But just
I apply four tests.
But just
Literary
because-
style,
Oh my God.
archaeological evidence, internal consistency, and archaeological evidence.
What is literary
That is
style
why
have to do
I
with
accept the
anything?
Quran as historically reliable, because the Quran passes those four tests. That's why I accept the writings of Josephus, the Jewish historian, as historically reliable, because it passes those four tests. Now, if you don't like my tests, no problem, but I just want to hear from you. What are the tests that you use to determine historical reliability?
I still take issue with your claim that if it passes these four tests, we can assume the entirety of the New Testament is true. Because you're saying if it passes
said
these four
no.
tests, that's what you. So the four tests are to determine whether or not we can trust the New Testament. That is
No,
what you
the
said.
Gospels.
The Gospels, the New
The
Testament.
writings of Paul are not historical narrative,
Okay,
they're
okay.
teaching.
All right, so
Well,
just
it's
the
not the New
Gospels, just the
Testament,
Gospels. That's
it's
fine. So that's fine.
The
So these
Gospels
four
are the
tests-
historical record of Christ.
So these
Right.
four tests determine whether or not we can trust the entirety of the Gospel, right?
Yes.
Okay, so again, things are on a claim-by-claim basis. If we are to assume that, or if we see in archaeological digs that we find some place that's in the Bible that's also in the Gospel, and then we find this place, does that prove that we can trust all the Gospel, including the claims that Jesus rose from the dead and that he performed all these miracles, et cetera, et cetera? Because, again, just because, let's say, 10,000 years from now, archaeologists dig up New York, does not mean that we assume that all of a sudden also Spider-Man existed. Things go claim-by-claim basis.
Spider-Man's fictional.
Yeah, and so because of that same logical progression, you're saying the same thing. It's like, okay, we find this archaeological place, and that means that we can trust the entirety of the gospel, including the claims about Jesus and his divinity and rising from the dead, et cetera, et cetera.
That's not my point.
What's your
You've
point?
missed my point. My point
So,
is,
explain.
the four tests that I gave you are not to answer the question, is Jesus God?
They are to determine whether
No.
we can trust the New Testament, or the
You,
gospel.
they are the four...
See if
Well,
we
you
can
go
trust
ahead and
it.
talk, and when
We
you're
asked
finished,
you
then I'll
what you
answer you,
believe
okay?
and
Go ahead. What's your
why.
point?
How
Well,
does that show that?
So you said, so I just want to make sure that this is correct. You said that the tests are to determine whether or not we can trust the gospel
He's trying to say
As
that-
historically reliable.
as historically reliable. Correct. So, and if we can say that it's historically reliable because of archaeology and all the three other tests.
Literary style,
Literary style,
internal consistency, archaeological evidence, and manuscript evidence.
Okay.
Very important.
So those four tests are determined that the gospel is correct. So if it passes these four tests, then we can determine that all of the gospel is correct, not claim by claim, but we can just assume the whole lump sum of it is correct and true and historically accurate.
find that New York City exists.
It passes those tests, so the evidence is it's historically reliable.
Okay, so because of those archaeological digs, because we found some pools somewhere, we are to assume now that Jesus rose from the dead.
I've said it over and over. Four tests, not one test.
I don't think your job right now is to find out what's true because you keep dancing around this wordplay. I think that you're just trying to convert people.
All right. What do you think about Jesus?
I don't think that. I don't even know if he existed, and if he existed, he definitely didn't exist in the way that the New Testament says.
Okay, what are you living for, and what's the evidence that whatever it is you're living for is true?
What am I living for?
What are you living for, and what's your evidence that whatever it is you're living for is true?
I want to love, live, and enjoy time with friends, family, and
Okay, what's your evidence that the
life.
purpose of human existence is to love, live, and live with family?
I
Why
guess
do you do that?
That's assuming that there is some sort of objective source of what everyone ought to do.
No. What it's assuming is that you told me the truth when you said what I'm living for is to live, love, and have a good time with my family. That's all I'm assuming, what you've claimed.
That's a particular claim about myself.
Yeah, so what's the evidence that that's the purpose of human existence, to live, love, and enjoy your family? Why do you do that?
You're jumping and assuming that I think that it's for all of human existence.
He's kind of asking for your existence. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, what's your reason for doing it?
I mean, it's based entirely on opinion. I enjoy it. I enjoy those things. I love people.
Notice that I never once said, I believe in Jesus because I enjoy it. Instead, I've appealed to an objective historical record, the New Testament Gospels. You read them for yourself, don't take it from me, and ask yourself, does the historical evidence of the way Jesus lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead point to him being a fraud, a charlatan, or does it point to him being reliable?
That's assuming that that it is in fact the objective source the Gospels
No, it's not assuming.
It's assuming that.
I've been going over this. Four tests to determine the historical reliability.
We talked about your four tests. It does not. We can't just say because we found some pool somewhere that we can also include the divinity of Jesus Christ.
All right, then you don't like my four tests. So please give me better tests that you use to determine historical reliability of any document.
A lot of the same tests as you, but Lithics knows that there's a lot of
Thank you for that compliment.
There's a big exception though.
All right, what's the exception?
We go on a claim-by-claim basis. We're not to assume just because if we find, for example, for the pool, that pool. If we find that pool, we can conclude that there was a pool here. Somebody created that pool, and if we find maybe some footprints or something that people bathed in that pool, we aren't to assume, oh, this other document had this pool, so everything in that document must be true.
So that was...
That's for sure, we agree.
It's a claim-by-claim basis.
That's right.
So it's a lot of the same test, but it's on a claim-by-claim basis.
Fine. But the evidence is the Gospels are historically reliable, so read them and find out, wait a second, is there mythology mixed in here? Is there parable mixed up in here? Obviously, yes, Jesus spoke in parables at times. So obviously his parables are not historically accurate presentations. He spoke in parables. Obviously he used hyperbole. He said, I tell you the truth, unless you hate your father and mother, your wife and children, you cannot be my disciple. That does Jesus literally in Luke 14 say, I'm to hate him? No. When you read it in context, respecting literary style, you know that that is hyperbole, an extreme form of speech to make a point. So no, I don't accept everything as being literal. I allow a speaker to use hyperbole, metaphor, simile, parable.
No, I never disputed that. I'm talking about when we are talking, but the claims about Jesus' divinity and the miracles he performed, those are truth claims. Those are things that you'd have to have evidence for.
You bet.
And I also have the question if God's concern was to save as many people as possible, I don't know why he wouldn't wait until we developed the technologies of cellular devices and satellites and where we could project this stuff all over the place to save everybody. But with that, I have a paper I have to finish and go to the library and finish.
Such a delight to talk with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
You essentially said earlier that God doesn't do certain things because he acts rationally. What defines the rationality that he acts behind? So, what defines the rationality that he acts behind?
You bet.
Is there some
reality?
Okay.
It is impossible for God to make a square circle. Why? Because square and circle contradict each other.
So then
it is impossible for God to exist and not to exist in the same way at the same time. You cannot exist and not exist in the same way at the same time. It's impossible. It's contradictory. So God does not dabble in the irrational in contradictions. He doesn't make square circles. He doesn't make 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah, so then there's something kind of a little bit deeper than God that defines what could be rational and what couldn't be.
Oh, okay. No, I would argue that God created in a rational way. God is eternal, no beginning, no end, and when God created, he created in an orderly, rational way.
Okay.
So, God did not create the law of gravity to be suspended when I want to jump off the top of that building. No, he created consistently. The law of gravity works. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay, that's order.
So then in the context of some of the miracles, you discussed some yesterday, like splitting of the sea and whatnot.
Yes.
So if his intervention there kind of goes against what is rational, then what gives that more credence or more believability than something like also what was discussed yesterday, like some of the more fantastical aspects of mythology?
You bet. Great question. All right. The splitting of the Red Sea or any other miracle is based on the idea that a supernatural God created the laws of nature. But the God who created those laws of nature can change them. And that's what a miracle is. God intervening and changing a law of nature. That all of a sudden the Red Sea is split. All of a sudden Jesus turns water into wine. All of a sudden Jesus walks on water. That is a changing of the natural law that God created.
And wouldn't that contradict the whole idea that he's bound by rationality? Or that he acts solely rationally, or not necessarily solely rationally, but that he acts rationally?
I would argue, when you look at the miracles that Jesus performed, you'll notice that they're very reasonable. Meaning by that, he feeds hungry people by taking 5 loaves and 2 fish and multiplying them. He heals a blind man by opening his eyes. God splits the Red Sea in order to save the Jewish nation from being wiped out by the Egyptians. So when you look at the miracles of Jesus and the miracles of God in the Bible, they're not irrational, they're very reasonable in that they are designed to preserve life, to save life, to promote life.
But morality, I believe, being a moral relativist, is subjective. Someone can have their different moral absolutes, and you can have your logical arguments about which morality is better, but of course, they may have different definitions of why a certain morality would be better than another. Like, is human life actually valuable versus if it isn't? Because if those two people try to argue the moralities, they're never going to be able to have a proper argument. They're going to keep cycling over whether or not human life is valuable. So what I'm getting at is, you can have absolutes and, believe your absolutes are the absolute as a moral relativist and not be hypocritical.
Okay, we disagree.
Oh yeah, and I'm glad we were able to.
My Muslim friends are convinced you can have more than one wife. Mm-hmm. That's a moral absolute. I have no problem with their understanding it's absolute because God, Allah, has declared that I'm allowed to have more than one wife. My disagreement with my Muslim friends is I don't trust your source of information about God the way I trust Jesus Christ. I think the evidence is that Jesus is more reliable than Muhammad. My argument with my Muslim friends is not, you have no basis for a moral absolute. No, baloney, they do. They believe in Allah. Allah says it. Eternal mind, prior to the human mind, decrees this. They're being intellectually consistent. But my atheist friend who says there are moral absolutes, they're being intellectually inconsistent. I'm convinced. Because if there is no God, then it's the human mind that creates and defines right and wrong. Which means I'm not right and you're not wrong, you're not right and I'm not wrong. It's all relative.
Right, and I guess, so as a relativist, I would argue that, humans' ability to come up with their morals could be on the same level as a potential God if one were to exist or not, if that makes sense. And
no, it does make sense.
That's where the relativist part.
You're a great guy and I'm not being to attack you.
Oh yeah, no, not at all.
But that line of thought, sir, I am convinced, is the heart of sin.
And that's fair, yeah.
That's what Adam and Eve did. Adam and Eve said, God, your definition of right and wrong, unacceptable. We will define right and wrong. In other words, I'm convinced that moral relativism is the quickest way to deify my opinion. My opinion is right. Everybody who disagrees with me is wrong. I am standing here saying that is an example of the height of human arrogance. So a Christian is not someone who says, I am brilliant, my definition is right. A Christian is someone who says, God, the eternal being, has created values of justice, integrity, compassion, and love. He's given us consciences and rational minds, and we are responsible to accept his definition of right and wrong, not create our own definitions.
Right. I guess you're passing on the responsibility of the morals creation to an omnipotent being that may or may not exist, right? Whereas somebody who doesn't believe in a God, they're saying that their morality is coming from themselves. At the end of the day, there's still my morals, those are the right ones, those are the definite ones, versus yours are not. Now, y'all use a God to justify. I use humans as our ability to come up with a good moral system and our ability to work it out.
And if in reality I have created God to justify my own morality, shame on me. And
agree to disagree at the end, I guess.
If I am simply creating God in my own image to justify my own opinions, my own system of morality, shame on me. That is incredible arrogance on my part.
And when I said you, I didn't mean you specifically. I meant like way back when the book was originally written,
right?
Whether or not there was a God or if some guy wrote it all out and was a really good writer.
You bet.
And we can agree to disagree at the end, but that was the point I was trying to shoot for since yesterday. I've been thinking about it all day, trying to get to that point where I'm just saying, one person says God's where it comes from, another person says where people comes from, and at the end of the day, that's relevant. I mean, the morality is relevant because, how you're going to get that across, either logical argument, violence, however, that's how you get people to...
Right, but in reality, if there is no God, morality is relative. Mm-hmm. In reality, if there is a God, then there are possibly moral absolutes, and that's obviously what Jesus Christ taught.
Yeah. Cool. Well, can I shake your hand real quick?
You bet. Good to see you again.
I was ready to reach that conclusion. I was thinking about it all day, trying to get there. It's awesome.
Thanks for your thoughts.
I would say our morality or our improvement morally has drastically increased during the 21st century. And from the perspective of somebody that's religious, they're all the same. But from the perspective of if murder is worse than lying, we have made an incredible improvement in society. And it's not even close to compare them at all.
Okay, what century had more murders than any other century throughout human history?
I couldn't tell you.
It's easy. 20th century. Right? You put Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Adolf Hitler, and Pol Pot together. There has never been a century that has had anywhere near the amount of bloodshed and murder that the 20th century had. H.G. Wells thought human beings are getting better and better.
Okay.
Science and technology, we're improving as a human race.
Okay.
World War I came along, but World War I was the war to end all wars. We're still going to get better. But then World War II came along, and H.G. Wells, this brilliant humanist, saw the return of genocide, slaughtering Jews on a scale that was incredible. And he wrote a book called The Fate of Man. And in this book, H.G. Wells writes, my faith in man is bankrupt because I have watched the most highly technological, highly scientific, highly educated nation of the world, Nazi Germany, destroy human life on a scale that is scary. See, that type of honesty I like. To argue that the human beings, we can get it better on our own, we can go forward some, and then we slip back, and the 20th century, sir, was so much worse than the 19th, 18th, 17th, 15th, 16th centuries. Is incredible. So let's be honest. Human beings are good at times, and human beings are atrocious at other times. We're all mixed up kids. That's why we all need help. And that's what Jesus Christ offers. Forgiveness, moral strength to become better with his help than we can on our own. That's why a follower of Christ takes Jesus so seriously. Because when you observe life, you see, boy, this little kid is a treasure. And then you see the little kid whap another kid over the head. We are mixed up kids.